Modern steel ships are of different types, but they all have many things in common. This cargo ship has a keel, and so has every other ship. This aircraft carrier has a bow and a stern, and you'll find them also on a destroyer, or a cruiser, or a battleship. If you're in the Navy or working around ships, your first job is to learn the names of things, what they're called, and where they belong. Much of this information is given on a ship's plans or blueprints. The first time you look at a blueprint, it's likely to strike you as a confusing jumble of lines, symbols, abbreviations, and notes. But they all mean something, just like the markings on a city map. The aim of this picture is to provide you with an elementary ship's directory. All ships are built to precise measurements, and since you can't take measurements without a starting point, certain lines must first be established as a guide in determining any given position. The first line to be established is the baseline. From this baseline, all heights or vertical measurements are calculated. The second is the center line. From this center line, all widths or transverse measurements are taken. The baseline and center line must always be considered as planes at right angles to each other. The baseline plane extends from an established point at the base of the ship. The center line plane runs the length of the ship midway between the two sides. On a blueprint, viewing the ship head-on, this line would indicate the baseline, and this, the center line. Note the symbols BL and CL. For convenience in locating and measuring heights above the baseline, a series of horizontal lines is established. They are called waterlines. For convenience in measuring cross or transverse distances, there are also vertical lines, called Buttock lines. All water lines and Buttock lines are actually planes, subdividing the entire ship into long strips or sections. Since water lines are measured upward, they are marked in terms of distance, or the number of feet from the baseline. Buttock lines are also marked in terms of distance. In this case, the number of feet from the center line. On this simplified blueprint, these lines would indicate water lines, and these Buttock lines. Note the symbols. In order to show the shape of the ship, one other set of lines is required. They are spaced at regular intervals between the forward and after perpendiculars, and they are called frame lines. Frame lines are actually vertical planes cutting across the ship at right angles to the center line plane. The frame lines are usually numbered progressively from the forward end to the after end of the ship. The distance between frame lines varies with different types of ships. Once the three sets of lines are established, we can locate, by referring to these lines any point on or in the ship. Perhaps the quickest way to gain a working knowledge of ship's terms and symbols is to study the ship's structure. At the very base of the ship, where the base line and the center line intersect, two long steel members provide the backbone of the ship. This flat steel member, usually so placed that its upper surface touches the base line, is known as the flat keel. Its symbol is K. This vertical member, joined to the flat keel at the center line, is known as the center vertical keel. Its symbol is CVK. Both the flat and vertical keel run the entire length of the ship. Joining the flat keel on either side is the bottom plating of the ship. These members, coming in now, have rather a tricky name. They rise straight up, like the walls of a room, but they're called floors. As you see, they are joined to the vertical keel, and they fasten to the bottom plating of the ship. Note that certain floors are closed floors. Others are lightened in weight by means of lightening holes. These are known as open floors. Extending through the length of the ship are other members, known as longitudinals. Floors and longitudinals divide the bottom of the vessel into spaces known as bottom compartments. They may be used for the storage of fuel oil, fresh water, or saltwater ballast. Or some of them may be empty or void. Steel plating laid over the floors and longitudinals forms an inner bottom to the ship, and that's what it's called. The symbol is IB. Another name for this plating is the tank top. Both terms should be easy to remember. These vertical members, which are joined to the floors by means of brackets, are the frames. They give shape to the ship. Frames of this type are installed for the most part in cargo-type ships. On certain warships, cruisers, for example, floors run up to the underside of the lowest complete deck. Above the lowest deck, deep frames known as web or belt frames are spaced fore and aft throughout the length of the vessel. The outside plating or skin of the ship is known as the shell plating. Each lengthwise series of plates is called a strake. The various strakes are lettered in alphabetic order, starting at the keel. Incidentally, the letter I is generally left out, since it might easily be confused with J. Note that the A strakes, joined to the flat keel on either side, are called the garboard strakes. Note also that the topmost strakes, in this case the J strakes, are known as the sheer strakes because they follow the sheer or longitudinal curve of the ship's profile. At suitable locations in the ship, there are vertical members known as bulkheads. Those you see now are known as transverse bulkheads because they run across the ship. Other bulkheads run lengthwise with the ship and are called longitudinal bulkheads. Together, these two sets of bulkheads, transverse and longitudinal, divide the vessel into numerous compartments. Between opposite frames at various levels, there is another set of connecting members, known as deck beams. These support the decks and tie the sides of the vessel together. Reinforcing the deck beams is a series of girders running lengthwise with the ship. These are known as longitudinal or fore and aft girders. Upon this network of beams and girders is laid the deck plating. The center strake is the A strake. Then, moving outboard or toward the sides of the ship, the strakes are lettered in alphabetic order. The outermost strakes are known also as the stringer plates. All of these structural members, the keel, the floors, the longitudinals, the inner bottom or tank top, the frames, the shell plating, the bulkheads, the deck beams and girders, and the deck plates go to make up the hull. If we divide a ship into two parts at the center line, everything to the left of the center line, looking forward, is the port side of the ship, and everything to the right is the starboard side. As we have seen, any lengthwise position in a ship is first established in terms of the nearest frame line. Midway between the forward perpendicular and the after perpendicular is the midship section. Note this very distinctive symbol. On a ship, anything ahead of the midship section is identified as forward or fore. Anything to the rear of the midship section is identified as aft or after. The middle portion of the ship, whether forward or aft, is commonly referred to as midships. However, all naval vessels are divided more specifically into three principal divisions: A, B, and C. These three divisions are separated from one another by transverse bulkheads. The A division is at the bow of the ship. The foremost end of the bow is called the stem. The foremost compartment in the bow of the vessel is known as the forepeak. It is separated from the rest of the A division by a collision bulkhead. Other bulkheads divide the A division into separate compartments. The B division is often referred to as the machinery division. It is here that the engines and boilers are installed. The C division, like the A division, is divided by bulkheads into a number of separate compartments. The after end of the ship is called the stern. This is the rudder. These are propellers. We now have the decks to locate and identify. The highest complete deck extending from stem to stern is called the main deck. This complete deck immediately below is called the second deck. And this is the third deck. Between complete decks, where vertical heights permit, there may also be a partial deck. This is known as a half deck. Below the lowest complete deck are other decks. These are called platform decks, or more commonly, the first platform, the second platform, and so on, numbering downward. The space below the lowest deck is known as the hold. It is used for the storage of ballast, cargo, and stores. On drawings and blueprints, positions on a ship are indicated by lines, abbreviations, symbols, and notes. This blueprint identifies a certain floor. To locate its exact position in a ship, we must refer to the frame line, indicated by this number, the waterline, and buttock lines. In reading this blueprint, it must be remembered that all these lines should be considered as planes. Our first clue is frame line number 108. Since frame lines start at the forward end of the ship, number 108 tells us that the floor is pretty well aft. Our next clue is provided by the word port. This sends us to the left-hand side of the ship looking forward. Our next clue is provided by these buttock lines. We know that buttock lines are measured outboard from the center line. Our final clue is this 2-foot waterline. Here, then, is the precise location of this open floor. All lines coincide exactly. Now let's try something different. The job called for here is to locate a hole for a pipe through a transverse bulkhead. Our first clue is number 110. This number identifies the frame line. Here, then, is the bulkhead at frame line 110. Our next step is to locate the hole. The blueprint shows that it is 3 feet, 3 inches outboard from the 4-foot buttock line. We measure outboard the indicated distance and strike a vertical line. The blueprint further shows us that the hole is 1 foot 3 inches above the 4-foot waterline. We measure upward the indicated distance and strike a horizontal line. Here, at the intersection of these lines, is the center of the hole. One final task, to locate a seacock. The blueprint shows that it is centered on the shell of the ship, 2 feet aft of frame line 22. First, we locate frame line 22, which is pretty well forward and in the A division of the ship. We measure 2 feet aft. Note that the blueprint reads, port side looking aft. Now we are looking aft, or toward the stern. Since we have faced about, port is no longer on our left-hand side, but on our right. The blueprint also shows that the center of the seacock is 1 foot 7 inches above the 8-foot waterline. We locate the 8-foot waterline on the port side of the ship. Now we measure up 1 foot 7 inches and strike a waterline. Here, where the waterline meets the shell, is the exact location of the seacock. And now let's double check. The blueprint shows the seacock to be 3 feet 3 inches outboard from the 8-foot buttock line. Measuring outboard the indicated distance, we again come to the exact location of the seacock. Remember then these three sets of lines, the base line and parallel water lines, the center line and parallel buttock lines, the perpendiculars and parallel frame lines. Keep these three sets of lines well in mind, and you have an essential key to your ship's directory.